Everyone in the neighborhood said Rhea was lazy. She never cooked, never cleaned, and her husband, Armin, came home every day to the same messy house. One morning, fed up with the gossip, he secretly set up a small camera in the kitchen to catch her doing nothing. But what the camera recorded wasn't what anyone expected. While Armin was at work, Rhea waited until the house was silent, then she opened a hidden door behind the pantry. What she did next would change everything he thought he knew about his wife. The neighbors always whispered when Rhea walked past. She heard them call her lazy and spoiled, pretending she couldn't hear. They didn't see how tired she looked, or how she avoided eye contact. Every morning she stepped outside to water the plants that were half dead but still standing. Her husband Arman left early, hardly saying a word. By the time he returned, the house was still cluttered, and dinner never waited on the table. The silence between them stretched longer each night, like something heavy neither of them wanted to touch. Armin's co-workers joked that he should teach his wife to hold a broom. He laughed along, but it burned inside him. He remembered how Rhea used to be cheerful, full of energy before the move to this new neighborhood. Now she barely left the house. He convinced himself she just didn't care anymore. Every night, when he entered their small home, the same pile of laundry greeted him. He wondered if love could survive laziness, or if he had made a mistake marrying someone who seemed to have given up entirely. Their house was small but decent, a neat two-bedroom in a quiet lane with short fences and trimmed lawns. Inside, though, it always felt unfinished. Dust gathered in corners, plates stacked on the counter, and curtains half drawn. Armin often sat in the living room, scrolling on his phone, trying not to notice the mess. But he noticed. Every stain and every unwashed cup reminded him of the effort he thought Rhea refused to make. He didn't see her glancing at him from the hallway, guilt in her eyes, wishing she could tell him everything. Rhea's days felt endless. The ticking clock followed her from room to room. She made tea but rarely drank it. She didn't cook, though the shelves were full. Sometimes she just stood near the sink, staring at the window, counting the cars passing by. She wasn't lazy. She was afraid. Every sound made her tense. Each knock at the door froze her in place. The house wasn't her home anymore. It was her secret to protect. Still, she forced herself to smile when Armin came home, pretending his cold silence didn't hurt. Armin scrolled through social media at night, watching clips of wives making fancy meals, spotless homes, perfect families. He compared those smiles to the quiet dinner table in front of him. Rhea would sit across from him, picking at her food. The distance between them wasn't measured in feet, it was in resentment and misunderstanding. He told himself he was patient, that he just needed proof before he confronted her. But deep down, part of him wanted to be proven right, to show everyone that he wasn't the problem in this marriage. Each night, Rhea waited for Armin's footsteps to fade before she began moving. She picked up small items, tucked them away, cleaned quietly, and checked the windows twice. She wasn't trying to impress him, she was making sure no one had seen her secret. Sometimes she pressed her ear to the wall, listening for faint breathing from the other side. Her heartbeat matched the slow rhythm of the ticking clock. She lived between lies and fear, unsure which one would collapse first. Armin slept soundly, never suspecting what lived just behind their pantry. Behind a row of cereal boxes, Rhea kept a small key. She checked it each morning after Armin left. It was her lifeline. The metal had worn smooth from her nervous fingers. She'd hidden it months ago, back when everything changed. The key didn't open anything valuable, at least not to anyone else. But to her, it opened the one thing worth risking everything for. She made sure no one had moved it. No one had noticed the faint scratch marks around the shelf. Then she sighed in relief, knowing her secret was still safe. Armin couldn't shake the feeling that Rhea was hiding something. Every time he mentioned cleaning or cooking, she looked away too quickly. He convinced himself it was guilt. One morning, while she was in the shower, he installed a small camera above the fridge. It was tiny, barely noticeable, aimed straight at the kitchen and pantry. He told himself it wasn't about control, he just wanted to see what she did all day. Still, As he left for work, his stomach twisted with unease, like even he knew he was crossing a line. That day, our man couldn't focus at work. His mind kept drifting to the camera feed he'd check later. He imagined catching Rhea lounging on the couch, scrolling her phone, wasting the day away. The thought both annoyed and comforted him. It gave him a reason to stay angry. But beneath that, a small part of him hoped to be proven wrong, to see her doing something that explained her distance. Either way, he told himself, by tonight he'd finally know the truth. He just didn't realize how much it would cost him. When Retta returned to the kitchen after Armin left, she instantly noticed the camera. Her stomach dropped, but her face stayed calm. She'd learned how to hide fear well. She pretended to tidy up, glanced at it once, then turned away as if she hadn't seen it. Inside, panic rose. She couldn't stop what needed to happen that day. If Armin watched, he might see more than she could explain. She exhaled slowly, trying to steady her heartbeat, and whispered a silent prayer that the camera's angle missed what truly mattered. When the front door clicked shut, Rhea waited exactly 5 minutes. She listened for the car engine fading down the street. Then she locked the door, drew the curtains, and walked to the pantry. The camera blinked silently from above. Her hands shook as she pulled aside the lowest shelf. Behind it, a narrow wooden panel revealed a small keyhole. She used the key, turned it gently, and pushed the door inward. A faint smell of dust and blankets came through. Rhea slipped inside, closing the panel behind her like she'd done many times before. The hidden room was small, barely larger than a closet. Dim light from a tiny window fell on a pile of blankets, a small table, and a few toys stacked neatly. On one side, a little boy slept soundly, his thumb tucked against his cheek. He couldn't have been older than 6. Rhea knelt beside him, brushing his hair back gently. He was her sister's son, and no one was supposed to know he was there. She had promised to keep him safe. Outside, the camera recorded nothing but an empty, silent kitchen. Rhea checked the boy's forehead, relieved that his fever had gone down. She had spent the last few nights half awake, listening for him in case he cried. The room was quiet, except for the faint hum of a small fan plugged into the wall. On the table sat a jar of imported honey. Armin had bought it weeks ago, never realizing why she wanted it. She mixed a spoonful into warm milk and set it beside the boy's bed. Every movement was slow, careful, like she'd practiced 100 times to avoid making a sound. She kept a small notebook where she tracked the boy's lessons. Reading, simple math, writing his name. He was bright, but lonely. He missed his mother, who was still in rehab. Rhea tried to smile for him, even when fear clawed at her chest. She taught him quietly, whispering, like it was a secret game. When he finished a page, she drew a small star with a pencil. "Good job," she mouthed silently. Outside, the world thought she was doing nothing. Inside this hidden space, she was fighting to give a child a future. Hours passed. The camera outside caught nothing unusual, just faint kitchen noises and shadows. Inside the hidden room, Rhea taught, cooked, and cleaned in silence. At noon, she finally sat down, exhausted. She took a piece of bread, spread honey on it, and ate slowly. It reminded her of home, of simpler days before the secrets began. She never wasted food. She always saved the rest for the boy. After lunch, she cleaned the tiny space, washed the cups, and tucked everything back neatly, as if she were preparing for an inspection no one knew about. When the boy woke up, Rhea handed him a small toy car she had repaired the night before. He smiled, the kind that melted every bit of worry in her chest. They played quietly until a sound outside made her freeze, a car door shutting. For a moment, her breath stopped. She checked the clock. Too early, but it was just a delivery man at the door. She waited until the footsteps faded before relaxing again. In that tiny room, her heart had learned to beat in silence. Every sound meant danger. Every minute meant survival. Sometimes, when the boy got scared, Rhea hummed softly. It was the same lullaby her mother used to sing when storms shook their house. The melody calmed him instantly. It also calmed her, reminding her that fear didn't always mean danger. It could just mean love trying to protect something fragile. She tucked him back under the blankets, promising he'd see his mother again soon. Outside, life went on as usual. Cars passed, birds chirped, neighbors gossiped. No one had any idea that behind a wall in that quiet home, two lives depended on a lie. At lunchtime, Rhea returned to the kitchen to grab more bread and milk. She glanced up at the camera and forced herself to act normal. She pretended to stretch, to yawn, to look bored. She even sat on the couch for a few minutes, scrolling through her phone to keep the illusion. Then she walked back to the pantry, opened it again, and slipped inside once more. The camera caught everything, the ordinary surface of a life. But what it couldn't see was the truth, living just inches beyond its sight. The afternoon sun made the small window glow gold. Rhea read aloud from an old storybook, her voice soft but steady. The boy traced the pictures with his tiny fingers. When he smiled, she felt both proud and heartbroken. Every minute with him was borrowed time. She knew the secret couldn't last forever. One day someone would find out. Maybe the landlord, maybe a neighbor, maybe our man himself. But for now, she focused on keeping him safe, one quiet day at a time. She couldn't afford to think about what would happen after. The hours slipped away, and Rhea sat by the tiny window in the hidden room, watching sunlight slide across the dusty floor. It was her quiet moment, the only peace she allowed herself. Sometimes she imagined what life would be like if she could tell Armin everything. Maybe he'd understand. Maybe not. The boy mumbled in his sleep, and she smiled faintly. She didn't need anyone's approval. She only needed to make it through another day without getting caught. That was her only goal. Survival wrapped in silence. That evening, Armin came home and immediately checked the hidden cameras app on his phone. The kitchen looked empty for hours. Nothing moved. He frowned, scrolling through the footage, seeing only brief moments. Rhea walking, sitting, eating, then disappearing from view. It looked like laziness. He shook his head in frustration. Nothing, he muttered. He didn't notice the small details, the timing, the rhythm, the moments she vanished for hours at once. He convinced himself he was right, that she did nothing all day, and that he'd finally seen the truth he always suspected. Armin's irritation grew each night as he watched more footage. The camera never showed any cleaning, no cooking, no movement worth noticing, just long stretches of stillness. He started thinking of her as a stranger who lived in his house. Meanwhile, Rhea carried her secret each day, heavier than before. She noticed him watching her more closely, his questions sharper. "What did you do all day?" he asked once. She shrugged. "Nothing much." The lie stung, but it was safer than the truth. Silence, she'd learned, could sometimes protect better than words ever could. One evening, Rhea's phone rang. It was her sister, calling from the rehab center. Her voice was weak, trembling, asking the same thing as always. "He's safe, right?" Rhea promised yes. Her sister begged her to keep hiding him until she could come home. The social workers would take him if they knew, and she couldn't bear that. Rhea hung up, her heart heavy. She had built her life around a promise that could destroy her marriage if revealed. She touched the small key on the counter, wondering how long her secret could stay buried. That night, dark clouds rolled over the neighborhood and thunder shook the windows. The rain came hard, drumming on the roof. Then the power flickered once, twice, and went out completely. Panic shot through Rhea. The fan in the hidden room stopped. She grabbed a flashlight and rushed to the pantry. Inside, the air was already warm. The boy stirred, uneasy in his sleep. She waved the flashlight, fanning him gently. Sweat ran down her neck. All she could think about was keeping him calm, quiet, and breathing, even if the world outside fell apart. Minutes later, she heard Armin's car outside. He was home early because of the storm. Rhea froze. The flashlight dimmed. The boy shifted under the blanket, half awake. Rhea pressed her hand to his mouth gently, whispering for silence. The sound of keys rattling made her heart pound. She had no time to fix the hidden panel. Carefully, she stepped out, closing it behind her, forcing a casual look. Armin opened the door, dripping wet, scanning the kitchen. She smiled weakly, hiding her shaking hands, praying he wouldn't notice what she'd been protecting all along. Armin placed his wet jacket on the chair, looking around the dim kitchen. The candles Rhea had lit during the power cut flickered weakly. He felt tired but restless. Something about the house felt off, like air moving where it shouldn't. He saw her standing still, arms crossed, eyes darting toward the pantry. "Everything okay?" he asked. She nodded quickly, too quickly. Later that night, when she fell asleep, he went to check the footage from the hidden camera again. Maybe this time, he thought, the truth would finally reveal itself. The next morning, Armin couldn't shake the feeling that something was being hidden from him. He spent his lunch break staring at the camera's memory card on his desk. That evening, he took it out, connected it to his laptop, and opened the video files. Most clips were blank, static, glitches, hours of still kitchen air. Something was wrong. He scrolled to the timestamps he remembered, but half the footage was missing. He frowned, thinking Rhea had somehow erased it. His frustration turned into determination. If she had secrets, he'd uncover them, no matter what. He downloaded a recovery program, typing impatiently as the progress bar moved. Lines of corrupted files appeared on the screen, names unreadable, but one folder stood out, labeled restored_unknown. He opened it and saw dozens of clips, all showing the kitchen. He hit play. For a long moment, nothing seemed strange, just Ra walking in and out, staring into space. But then, at 9:46 a.m., she went to the pantry and disappeared. Minutes passed, then hours. The camera stayed on, but she never came back into view. Armin leaned closer, confused and uneasy. He replayed the same footage, zooming in at the moment she vanished. There was no trick or cut. It was one smooth recording. Rhea opened the pantry, bent slightly, and was gone. His heart began to pound. Maybe there was another exit he didn't know about. Maybe she had someone over. His thoughts raced in circles. He needed answers. He texted his friend who worked in IT, asking if he could analyze the file for editing or tampering. "Sure," his friend replied. "Bring it tomorrow. I'll see what's really there." Armin hardly slept that night. The next morning, Rhea woke before sunrise. She moved quietly through the house, her face pale. She could sense Armin's suspicion. While he showered, she took the small key and pressed it into her pocket. Standing by the sink, she stared at her reflection in the window, whispering to herself that she wasn't a bad person. She'd only done what was right. Still, the guilt felt endless. When Armin left, she leaned against the counter, tears falling silently. She didn't know that her husband's discovery was only hours away. At his office, Armin handed the SD card to his friend, who inserted it into his computer. "Some of the files were hidden," his friend said. "Let's pull everything." As the recovered clips played, Armin felt a mix of dread and anticipation. "Look here," his friend pointed. "The footage wasn't deleted, it was encrypted. Someone didn't want you to see it." Armin's throat went dry. When the first hidden clip started, the camera view showed the kitchen again. Rhea appeared, calm and alert, moving differently than usual. It didn't look like laziness anymore, it looked like purpose. The next video started just after Armin left for work. The pantry door opened, and Rhea stepped in. The camera stayed fixed on the still kitchen for hours. Then faintly, through the microphone, came the sound of a child laughing. Armin froze. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. His friend nodded, eyes wide. They listened again. The laughter was soft but unmistakable. The screen showed nothing but the same empty space. Armin's pulse raced. He felt like he was watching someone else's life. He didn't understand what was happening inside his own home. He went home early, pretending to have a headache. When Rhea asked if he was okay, he simply nodded. All evening, he couldn't take his eyes off the pantry. Each time she passed it, his suspicion grew. Later that night, when she fell asleep, He got up and walked to the kitchen. The house was dark, except for the light from his phone. He opened the pantry slowly, studying every corner. Then he saw it, a small panel behind the lower shelf. His breath caught. It looked like a door. A door he'd never seen before. Armin crouched down, touched the panel, and pushed gently. It didn't move. He searched until he found a faint keyhole near the edge. He stood there for a long time, heart racing, trying to decide what to do. Then he heard a faint sound, a whisper maybe, or the soft shuffle of movement from behind the wall. He froze. His mind told him to stop, to leave it alone. But curiosity won. He turned away, deciding he'd wait until tomorrow to confront her directly. He went back to bed, pretending everything was normal. Sleep didn't come. Armin kept replaying every strange detail of the past months, her distance, her routine, the missing hours. Around dawn, he got up quietly and returned to the pantry. The house was silent. He pushed harder on the panel, and this time it shifted slightly. A thin line of light appeared at the edge. He peered through and saw movement, a shadow, a figure, small and quiet. His stomach dropped. Someone was inside his walls. He took a deep breath, pushed the door open wider, and stepped into the secret room. If you're wondering what Armin saw inside, you're not alone. Stay tuned, because what he found changed everything. Inside the cramped space, Armin stopped dead. Rhea sat on the floor beside a small child, reading softly from a worn book. The boy looked up, startled, clutching a blanket. Rhea's face turned pale when she saw Armin. For a moment, no one moved. The silence felt louder than a scream. Armin's mind raced. Why was there a child here? Who was he? Rhea's lips trembled, her eyes wide with fear and shame. The room smelled of dust and honey. On the table, he saw drawings, tiny shoes, and a single candle burning low. Rhea stood slowly, as if afraid of what he might do. Armin wanted to speak but couldn't. Every thought tangled in confusion. She whispered his name, but he didn't respond. His gaze moved between her and the child, his heart pounding. Finally, she stepped forward and placed her hands together like a plea. She tried to explain, voice shaking, that the boy was her sister's son, that she'd been hiding him since the day social workers threatened to take him away. Her words tumbled out faster than his mind could process. The boy peeked out from behind Rhea, eyes wide with fear. Armin realized he wasn't just any child, he looked familiar. He'd seen that face before in old family photos. He turned toward Rhea, still speechless. She knelt beside the boy, whispering that everything was fine, even though her voice cracked. Armin stood there, torn between anger and disbelief. He thought of the months he'd spent resenting her, of the camera, the spying, the judgment. Everything suddenly shifted. The lazy wife, he thought. He knew wasn't lazy at all. She was hiding someone's life. Rhea finally broke down and told him everything. The calls from her sister, the fear, the late nights trying to keep the boy safe. Armin listened, stunned. Every lie she had told now made sense. Every silence was protection. Still, betrayal burned inside him. He wanted to yell, to demand why she hadn't trusted him, but the sight of the child stopped him. He saw how fragile he looked, how carefully Rhea shielded him. Armin's anger dissolved into something else, guilt. For months, he'd been searching for proof of her flaws, not her pain. He sank down against the wall, feeling the weight of it all. The boy stared at him with cautious curiosity. Rhea's voice shook as she said she'd meant to tell him, but every time she tried, she lost her nerve. "You wouldn't have understood," she said softly. Armin realized she might have been right. He thought of how easily he'd judged her, how quick he was to believe the worst. He'd been so focused on being right that he'd forgotten how to see her. For the first time in months, he looked at her and truly saw. They sat in silence for a long time, the three of them breathing the same heavy air. Armin reached for the jar of honey on the table, opening it absent-mindedly. "You bought this," he said quietly. Rhea nodded, explaining she used it to calm the boy when he couldn't sleep. It was something their mother used to do. Armin's throat tightened. The simplest things, the honey, the long days, the still camera footage, suddenly meant something different. Everything he thought was laziness was love hidden in silence. When the truth settled in, Rhea braced herself for him to shout or leave. Instead, he stood and walked out without a word. She followed, heart racing. In the kitchen, he stopped, looking up at the small camera blinking above the fridge. "It recorded everything," he said flatly. Her stomach dropped. "Even this," she whispered. He nodded. Every second. For the first time, she saw fear in his eyes too. Not anger, fear of what the truth could do if anyone else saw it. That footage could destroy them both, if someone found out. The next morning, Armin sat at his desk, staring at the footage on his computer. He hovered over the delete key for a long time. The video played one last time, Rhea tucking the boy into bed, whispering gently, brushing his hair. The same hands he thought were idle had been saving someone's childhood. Finally, he pressed delete. The screen went blank. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. Some truths, he realized, weren't meant for the world. They were meant to be kept safe, quietly, like the people who carried them. When Rhea entered the room later, she found him holding the camera in his hands. He looked up at her, eyes tired but calm. "It's gone," he said simply. She nodded, unsure whether to thank him or apologize. Neither spoke again. Instead, they stood together, the silence softer than before. It wasn't perfect forgiveness, but it was a start. That evening, Armin helped her fix the small fan in the hidden room and brought new blankets for the boy. Without saying it, he'd chosen to share her secret instead of expose it. Days turned into weeks, and their home slowly changed. Armin began helping with chores, cooking small meals, tidying without complaint. He didn't do it out of guilt. He did it because he finally saw what effort looked like, even when it was invisible. Rhea stopped pretending so much. The tension between them loosened. They spoke more, laughed a little, and each night before bed, Armin checked that the hidden room was warm and quiet. It became their unspoken bond, a secret they protected together instead of one she bore alone. The months that followed brought small but real peace. Rhea's sister finally completed rehab and was allowed to bring her son home. The day they left, Rhea held the boy tightly, tears falling as he smiled and waved. Armin stood beside her, his hand resting on her shoulder. The secret that had divided them had somehow become what brought them back together. That night, when Rhea closed the hidden door for the last time, she didn't feel afraid. The house finally felt like a home again, quiet, real, and honest. The camera above the fridge was still there. Though it no longer worked, Armin never bothered to take it down. Sometimes he caught himself glancing at it, remembering what it had shown him. It wasn't proof of laziness, it was proof of love disguised as failure. Every time someone mentioned Rhea's name, or joked about her being the lazy wife, he felt a pang of regret for how quickly he had judged. The camera hadn't exposed her shame, it had exposed his blindness. He never told anyone that. Some lessons he learned: stay private. One weekend, Rhea baked for the first time in months. The smell filled the small kitchen, warm and sweet. Armin walked in, surprised, and smiled. She told him it wasn't for show. She just wanted to. They ate quietly, sunlight spilling across the counter. It wasn't about the food. It was about peace, finally finding its way back into their home. The mess didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the truth between them, plain and unpolished, finally seen for what it really was. Weeks later, the neighbors still gossiped. They still called her lazy, wondering why she didn't work or socialize. Rhea didn't care anymore. She smiled when she heard them, because for once she didn't need to explain herself. She knew what she had done, and why. She had kept a promise. And Armin, who used to join the gossip quietly, now only smiled too. He'd learned that the loudest people often see the least. Their peace didn't come from proving anyone wrong. It came from knowing the truth didn't need witnesses. One evening, Armin stood in the kitchen watching Rhea sip tea by the window. The same woman he once doubted now looked calm, content. The world still thought she was lazy, but he knew better. He saw the strength behind her quiet, the hidden courage that had protected a child, a family, a promise. He reached up, turned off the broken camera, and whispered softly, "No more watching." Rhea looked at him and smiled. Some truths, they both knew, didn't need to be captured, they only needed to be remembered.